Thank you so much, Sam Pantazopoulos, for coming on Wellness Your Way. I'm thrilled to have you here.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here.
Yes. Well, I've read the audience a bit of a more formal bio, so they know your credentials and all of that. But could you just start by telling us a little bit about you?
Definitely. And my credentials are short because I had the idea for the company in college. Um, but I'm originally from Maryland. I grew up in a small town there, and then I came out to University of San Diego for school. So I've been in San Diego for about 10 years now, which is kind of wild to think. But I came out, I studied business. That was always something that I knew I wanted to do in the entrepreneurial space. My dad was an entrepreneur growing up, so I was really close to him in that regard. But I didn't imagine I would find myself in the wellness world because I was never a wellness minded individual. I never played sports or anything like that. But through a random kind of series of personal events and opportunities that happened with school, I found myself kind of in this wellness, business, social impact fused space, and now wellness is a big part of my life. So that's me in a nutshell.
Amazing. Well, you could not have ended up in a better place for wellness. My sister-in-law and brother-in-law live in San Diego, and I think I just feel healthier when I'm there. Maybe it's the ocean or like the vibe or all the healthy foods or something, but it just feels awesome to be healthy in San Diego.
I'm convinced it's the weather and what you said, accessibility. Anywhere
Yeah.
you go, it's so easy to get a really like tasty, healthy meal
Yes.
or have an experience that's fun and active. So San Diego definitely makes it easy to be wellness.
Absolutely. Oh, very great. Well, you mentioned already starting the app. So let's dive in and talk a little bit about it. Your company is called Visor. And the way that you describe it, or that I've seen it described, is an innovative app that supports a sustainable daily wellness routine by partnering with health forward brands to incentivize exercise, increase access to healthy foods, and promote whole person health. So those are a lot of words that I'm excited about. They sound very enticing, but tell us, what does that actually mean?
Totally. Yeah, I'll unpack all of the buzzwords there.
Great.
The whole goal of Visor is really just to help people get healthier. And there are a few ways that we do it. For me, I had always struggled with finding motivation to work out. It was something that I wanted to do, but I didn't really know how. I didn't have the tools or even the coaching or education on how to do it.
Yeah.
So I started turning to like really unhealthy habits to try
Mm,
to compensate for that, either like restrictive eating or over exercising. And couldn't really understand why it was so hard.
yeah.
Why do so many people want to be healthy, but we don't know how to get there?
Yeah.
And then on the opposite side of that coin, I saw a big resource gap. So we were kind of talking about San Diego, how easy it is to live well because you have access to all of these things.
Mm-hmm.
But if you don't have access, it's incredibly difficult to
Yes.
work health and wellness into your life. So I thought if I was able to help close the resource gap for someone else, that would be motivating to me to want to
Yes.
work out. So that's kind of the core of Visor, where every day you work out, you have the opportunity to give a meal through a US food bank that's paid for by brands in our network. And then you earn points that you can use for free healthy products for yourself. So kind of looping back in that healthy relationship with food and getting yourself in a daily wellness routine, bringing the buzzword back.
Amazing. Oh, I absolutely love that. So it came from your story and your desire to find a motivation kind of bigger than yourself. Because we all, I believe, all humans, almost all humans, 99.9% want to help others. And we do have um that altruism deep inside of us. It's so rarely connected though to our own personal fitness. In fact, I've found myself even saying the opposite, like, oh, this is time for me. And that can be motivating. But I think for many people struggling to feel like they deserve that time for them, or they can even make that time for them, connecting it to something bigger, that was just genius. I love it.
Thank you. Yeah, I knew I needed something because like you said, that time for me or that enjoyment of fitness comes later in the
Yeah.
habit formation process. So I would try to do it and I was like, I don't enjoy this at all. This is
Yeah.
a terrible experience for 30 minutes to 60 minutes. And I wanted to reframe that for myself. And I used
Yes.
supervisor as short for incentive, used the incentive model that we have to do so, but also was kind of able to repattern a lot of my beliefs around fitness. And
Amazing.
that it doesn't have to be hard. It actually shouldn't. Like it should be something you enjoy doing.
Yes.
And having to kind of swap out that mentality was really big as well.
Absolutely. That exercise as punishment, especially honestly for people who grew up playing a sport or something like that, where they were punished to go run a mile or they were punished to do push-ups or something, then they're adults, they're no longer playing the sport and they still think of it as punishment. This can be so detrimental to our mentality. And I hate those words like should or have to. I always tell my clients, don't should all over yourself with exercise. Advisor's really helping with that. So it sounds like you had this concept in mind. You wanted to motivate people from more of a positive standpoint as opposed to a should or a have to. How do you think people, if they're like, that sounds really nice, but I'm going to download an app and it's still going to feel like a should, how do you think this changes people's mentality?
So the goal is when we use the language daily wellness routine, it was really to try to build a tool that was going to meet people where they are. So
Great.
there's a variety of ways that you can reach your goal. You could just walk. So you could do
Love it.
10,000 steps and we're able to track that on your phone, even if you don't have
Awesome.
a wearable. If you do have an Apple Watch, a Fitbit, a Whoop, we're able to track your heart rate. So
Great.
something like a 30-minute workout, you're able to hit your goal for the day. And that could be anything from yoga to walking as well. And then we even partner with studios. So you're able to reach your goal by taking class at a studio in our
Great.
network. And that's, again, kind of the whole suite of services. If you like HIIT, we partner with them. If you like spin, yoga. So trying to build a tool that, hey, and what looks good for you today could look different for you next week. So how are we going to support you where you are today and then support you as you evolve in your wellness journey? So it really becomes almost a complement to it rather
Yes.
than, oh, I have to do this thing that's separate of what I want.
That's really interesting. I have found myself, I'm like a more is better person. So if some is good, more must be better. And I know that for exercise, that is not the case. So if I were to be incentivized, even honestly with my Fitbit, not with my Aura Ring, because that tells me to slow down, but with my Fitbit, it's like more is better. So if I'm doing 10,000 steps, why not do 50,000 steps? And clearly that's not very helpful. So I like what you said about meeting you where you are. If someone is in that more is better mentality, do they donate more meals to food banks if they do 5 exercise sessions a day, or how do you balance that?
So it's a good point because we really are focused on kind of that sustainable routine and how do we define success. So on Visor, once you hit your goal, you've unlocked it for the day, and then it will be
Great.
at midnight and you can do it the next day. There's no added incentive to
Love that.
go do a 50-mile run. If you want to, I support you. But I wanted to show that going for a 30-minute walk today is
Yes.
just as beneficial as taking an Orange Theory class tomorrow, and they both count as success.
I absolutely love that. I didn't know that before we started recording, but it makes me love the app even more. I don't like the word forcing mechanism because it sounds mean, but a loving mechanism to myself. I walk only on Mondays. And so we're recording this on a Monday. That's today. I went for a walk and I felt great about it. It was a beautiful day. I didn't feel the need to push my body any more than that, but I'm also really happy that I didn't choose to do nothing because it gave me the opportunity to be outside, to get some energy going, to have some time for me, like we said. So I really like that you're incentivizing all different areas of that. That allows people to create their own balance. Wonderful.
Thank you. Yeah, like you touched on, the compounding benefits there exist as well, where there is just the walk, but also you're exposed to the sun and you're getting fresh air and there's mental benefits to that. So like wellness is this whole ecosystem of things that happen when you do one behavior. It's kind of like a domino.
Yeah.
So getting out, you already won the day.
Absolutely. And speaking of wellness, or speaking of interconnectedness and dominoes and all of that, let's talk about how you decided to connect this with, excuse me, the community. It seems kind of like an obvious question because all kinds of companies these days are building in community incentives and partnerships and things like that. And that's clearly what the consumer is demanding. But I bet you have some thoughts on specifically why wellness is a really great complement for community initiatives. Any thoughts on that?
Definitely. I am probably the biggest advocate for wellness as a public health tool. I think
Love it.
that it's kind of the foundational building block of how we live our lives, where if you're not feeling good in your body, it's really challenging for you to do anything else well.
Yeah.
So if you look at, in the instance of not having access to healthy food, if somebody's experiencing food insecurity, it's incredibly difficult to pay attention in school or to perform well at work or to
Yeah.
have really rock solid interpersonal relationships.
True.
There's economic instability. All of these things come from that base need not being met.
Yeah.
Similarly, if you're not moving your body often, you're seeing all of these mental and emotional impacts of that will
Hmm.
impact, again, how you're showing up at work, how you're showing up at school. So you really have a whole population that's being negatively impacted by
Yeah.
these really preventative things, which is moving often and eating enough nutrients, where the belief was if we could get enough people aligned behind that as an understanding and willing to direct resources and attention and platform reach towards solving that problem, it was
Hmm.
an upstream intervention that was going to fix all of these downstream problems.
Yeah.
So wellness, I think, is like crucial for
Hmm.
everything else, even though historically, I think it's been positioned as a luxury or a nice to have or some a side benefit to a company's benefit offering, when really it's foundational to everything
Yes.
we're doing.
I love it. It's reminding me of all these quotes and cliches and all of this, like a rising tide lifts all sails or whatever that quote is. And I always say to myself, really, I can't change the health crisis today. Like me, myself, I cannot make everyone in the world healthier. But if I start with myself and my clients and those I'm interacting with, I can create a ripple effect. And if so many of us are doing that, we can truly change the health of the world. And your app is a great example of that. Not only am I improving my own self so that I can interact better with the people around me, but I'm helping other people get healthy as well. It's amazing.
Thank you. Yeah, and I think you said it well, that health is a participatory journey.
Yeah.
We've been taught that through marketing and media messaging, if you
Yeah.
don't hit these goals, then it's because you didn't have willpower. Or if you
Hmm.
didn't stick to this diet plan, it's because you weren't committed.
Yeah.
And that's just not the case.
Yeah.
So often it's our environments and our relationships. And I totally agree with you that the more people that are mindful of it and are being almost like a model in their communities, the
Yes.
easier it is for people to gravitate towards that and be interested and try it.
Love it. That's amazing. So we touched a little bit on making time for fitness and prioritizing ourselves. And I tend to find, especially with women, it's a generalization, but unfortunately in this case, I think it's somewhat true that they tend to prioritize everyone else and everything else. And then there's just nothing left at the end of the day for them. So, in your own journey or from what you've learned from your clients or otherwise, what are some tips you would have to overcome this?
It's a great question. I can definitely relate to it. I think when we first launched the app, there's a lot of messaging in the world about startup culture and what
Mm,
that's supposed to look like,
yep.
and that it's supposed to be incredibly hard and it's supposed to be all consuming. And that's how you demonstrate commitment. And
Yeah.
I think that was this was my first job out of school. I had the idea at
Mm,
school.
wow.
So I think a lot of that was my expectation of how you were supposed to show up.
Yeah.
And that did not pair well with setting healthy boundaries between
Yeah.
life and work. And that was something that I became really mindful of as we started to grow our team, because I would never want people on my team to not have that kind of boundary. And if I wasn't modeling it, then it would be really difficult for that to truly be an expectation. It's one thing to say
Yes.
it, but you almost have to model it for it to be authentic. So I kind of had to look at my own life and say, okay, where is work being all consuming and how can I draw healthy boundaries and find work-life balance if I want this to be sustainable, which is challenging when your job is in the wellness space.
Right.
And so much of the things that you do for fun are also tied in with
Right.
the work. So it's an ongoing process, I would say, but boundaries, I think, is the key one for people that are listening in and kind of wondering, how do I do this? And really defining for yourself, like, what's a yes for me versus
Yeah.
what am I saying yes to out of obligation or pressure or people pleasing, commitments I've made. I think those are the two big recommendations.
Yeah. I got a comment and a question for that. The comment is I remind myself if it's not a hell yes, it's a hell no. And it's like we know it in our gut. I know when I'm saying yes to something that truly is not right for me. I know it. I already feel that tension, that cognitive dissonance, that butterfly in my stomach, whatever it is. And so I try to remember that simple saying, if it's not a hell yes, it's a hell no.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then the second is a question. Now, for someone like you and I who practice boundaries a lot, this sounds very elementary, but I want you to try to answer it as I'm saying it because I'm shocked that people don't know. They're like, boundaries, that sounds like a good idea, but I don't even know what a boundary is. So can you give us an example, very specific example of what a boundary might be that you might set?
Yeah, definitely. And if you're listening to this and you're feeling that way, that's how I was
Yep.
12 months ago. So I'm
Yeah.
right there with you, where I didn't really understand what a boundary was either. And it had to be really clearly spelled out for me. And this I remember really resonated that a boundary is not saying this can't happen or this person can't do this or this can't come into my space. That's control.
Yeah.
Versus the boundary is if this happens, this is how I'm going to respond to it. And
Love that.
being prepared for that in advance is something that makes it really helpful. So I went through a season where I was trying to cut back on alcohol.
Yeah.
And I was at a lot of networking events and a lot of dinners and company
Mhm.
events and all these professional environments where alcohol was very present. So one thing that was helpful with boundaries was knowing in advance. This is just an example, but knowing in advance, okay, if this comes up, here's how I'll respond to this. Or if this happens, here's what I'll do. And then it
Yes.
was much easier to kind of develop and stick with that habit versus had I gone in and not had almost a plan, it would have been
Yes.
challenging to see it through, I think.
I love it. Alcohol is another thing I talk a lot about with my clients. So, are you willing to share that boundary? If I go to a networking event and I'm trying to not drink on that night, what would you do?
Yeah, I think it's shifted a little bit as I've gotten more comfortable with not drinking in those kinds of settings. At the beginning, I think it was just natural. We were at happy hour meetings all the time, and it was just what was kind of expected, where I would tell people, oh, like I'm not drinking, and people ask a lot of questions. Well,
Yeah.
why aren't you drinking? You know, are you pregnant? Do you have a problem? You'd be shocked
Yeah.
at some of the questions that people ask.
Oh,
But one thing that I found in those early stages that was super helpful was ordering something that was a replacement.
yeah.
So one thing I would order is a bitters and soda that actually
Ooh.
looks like a cocktail. It's fun. It kind of has a sound to it. It's vibey, but it's not a soda water. So
Okay.
that was kind of helpful as a switch. And then the more I went to events and wasn't drinking, so weddings and bachelorette parties and conferences and all these things, the more comfortable you get with it. Where now it's like, oh, I just don't want to. And that's not
Yeah.
enough. But in the beginning, I almost felt like I had to justify it or have a reason to respond when people had questions.
I love showing that transition. I'll tell people at the beginning, if what you have to do is just pretend you're drinking and get I've never tried the bitters in club soda, so I will do that. I'm the boring like club soda and lime or something like that. If you just have to pretend you're drinking, then fine. It's a white lie. That's what you have to do. Eventually opening yourself up to actually saying, I don't want to drink, or I'm not drinking right now, or something like that. It can be really empowering. And it can be super annoying when people ask those dumb questions and they don't have filters. But I try to remind myself they are not being rude. They are truly uneducated. They're not asking that question to harm you in any case, whether it's alcohol or anything else. They're asking that question because they don't know. So it's a great opportunity for us to educate.
Great point. Because one thing I found was that more often than not, if you actually dug into it, it was curiosity and people
Yeah.
that were interested in doing the same thing, but hadn't quite taken that step yet.
Yes.
So the more you kind of engage in the conversation and say, oh, well, this is what I'm doing, this is why I'm doing it, not obviously over explaining to somebody who's uninterested, because
Right.
that, but there were several people who I encountered who wanted to do something similar and didn't quite have a playbook. And in
Right.
chatting about it, I would see them a few months later and they had done, something very similar. So
Oh, I love that. Thank you for sharing that.
Definitely.
So you said that was a season in your life. I'm curious now, as a business owner, you still have a ton on your plate. What is one of your biggest health challenges right now, and what are you doing to work on it?
Oh, good question. I think one of my biggest health challenges right now would probably just be fatigue.
Yeah.
I think sleep is so important, and there are all of these things that compromise our sleep, like stress and screen time and
Hmm.
just having a busy schedule that when you look at it objectively, I'm not sure which one of these can move. So another situation kind of with boundaries was like, okay, I'm going to keep my phone in another room when I
Yes,
go to sleep. And at least I know like it's a cutoff for that amount of time because sleep, again, one of those foundational things, if you're not locked in there, everything's going to fall. So that's probably something I'm
absolutely.
super mindful of and working on presently.
I love it so much. I'm chuckling only because of my previous 24 hours. So and we've talked about this on the podcast before. It's probably been 5 or 6 years that I've been sleeping with my phone in another room. It's a life changer. Anyone who's listening, if you haven't yet committed to that, please give it a shot because it's so awesome. It takes away that tendency just to turn over and check immediately and get that cortisol rush. So I love that. But the reason I'm chuckling is I usually, meaning 98% of the days, have a boundary of like 30 minutes before bed, not checking my phone, not doing work, not doing any of that kind of stuff. And last night, just situationally, I worked literally up until the moment I went to bed. And my sleep, because I track this stuff, was terrible. Even my blood sugar was like all over the place at night. So it's not just a nice thing that we say, all these wellness people say, it truly is impacting our bodies and we are resilient. So one night, am I going to be fine? Totally, I'll be fine. But if someone listening is thinking, oh, wow, that might be happening to my body every single night, maybe you're not tracking your sleep, take it from me. It really does make an impact.
100%. And I think because I started so low in my health and wellness journey, I was eating all sugar in my
Yeah,
diet, was never
yeah,
working out. I was partying a lot on
yeah,
screens way too late into the night. My sleep was entirely disrupted for years that I
yeah.
had assumed that was the baseline of how you
Hmm.
feel. And when you start removing some of these things, I think it was Russell Brand maybe and Rich Roll. I was listening to their podcast
Yeah.
and they talk about how when you strip things away, it sounds like there's nothing left, but it's
Mm.
really like threading a needle. And then you get down super, super small, and then all the opportunity comes out on the other side. And it was like once I
Oh,
stripped away all these things that weren't making me feel good, then
yeah.
my body just kind of returned to how it's supposed to feel, I think.
Yes.
And you never even know what you can
Yeah.
get to if you haven't kind of taken away the things that are bringing you down.
That's such a good point that you didn't even know it wasn't the way your body optimally felt. I always think it's so unfortunate that like if I'm eating an all sugar diet, like you said you were, and then I eat one salad one time, my life doesn't radically change. It's not like all of a sudden have energy to run 5 miles and I'm not bloated ever again and whatever. And sometimes the opposite does happen. So if I'm eating super healthily and I eat one blowout meal or something, I might feel really uncomfortable. But it's so unfortunate that we don't feel the immediate benefit from one single health trade off. So I always try to remind people, okay, you went for that walk. And yeah, true. Maybe you didn't have enough energy to last through the whole day, but was it fun? What benefit can you see? Did you enjoy being outside? Did you enjoy disconnecting? Do you feel stronger? Do you feel something? We've got to connect to those benefits, even if it's not life altering that very first time.
100%. It's like, how do we make the value of what we're doing more immediate? And
Yeah.
that was kind of the big idea for Advisor. How do we make the value of what we're doing immediate? Because if I have to wait 8 to 12 weeks to start feeling good about what I'm doing,
Yeah.
if it feels bad for every day until then, I'm
Yeah.
not going to do it.
Yeah.
And I think that's what you see with, the 80% of the population who is mindful and would like to be consistently hitting exercise goals, but for
Yes.
some reason isn't.
Yeah.
It's that gap
Yeah.
between feeling good about it and doing it.
Yeah. Oh, So good. You're using a lot of background psychology in here to motivate people for good. It's not that you're twisting this in any slimy way. It's great. It's a win-win-win. We've talked about two of the wins, the benefits of exercise for ourselves or movement for ourselves, giving back to the community. We have not yet talked about the third leg of this, which is partnering with some health-minded brands. So have a couple questions about this, but first just tell me about this partnership.
Yeah, so it's called the Visor Certified Impact Partner Ecosystem. So that's all of the brands that have come together in our network that are committed to democratizing wellness. And that looks like a few different pillars. So some that we covered is increasing preventative movement, increasing access to healthy food, prioritizing wellness, equity, and inclusion. There's one that is increasing the healthfulness of the American diet. And that's on both sides of increasing access to healthy food by supporting US food banks, but also providing these health forward rewards through the app.
Yes.
So tangibly how that works is every day you convert your exercise into a donation. You also earn a point as the user, and you can use those points in our marketplace for prizes and gifts for yourself.
Great.
So if you look through, we partner with a ton of brands, and you're able to either go to Takaya and get a free taco, or go get a kombucha at one of our local partners, all the way up to you could have something shipped to your door, or you could go to Walmart or Rite Aid and get grocery products, with a few more retailers coming soon. So it's like this whole ecosystem again of brands saying, hey, you may not have considered that apple cider vinegar is something you want to work into your routine. Why don't you come try something that we have? We'll give it to you to see if this is something you're interested in working into your routine. And if you like it, now we've kind of connected that brand and individual who align around the same values.
Oh, that's so amazing. People get so excited about products and samples and all of that kind of stuff. So there are going to be those unicorns who are intrinsically motivated to move. If those are not you, which is not the most people, then you've got the incentive of giving back to your community. You've got the incentive of getting points, which gamifies it, and you've got the incentive of getting prizes or free products. This is awesome. So in choosing these companies, there is a lot of mishmash out there on the marketplace. A lot of companies saying they're healthy and they might not align with what we might define as actually healthy. So how are you as a business owner sorting through all of this and selecting your partner companies?
So there's a couple dimensions to it. So first, I mentioned food, but it's not just food. It's also kind of the entire better for you category.
Great.
So it could be houseware, it could be skincare, it could be clothing, it could be food. So kind of anything that's going to help you with your daily wellness routine.
Great.
In terms of the brands we bring in, these are brands that we're talking to, we have relationships with, we're having them kind of fill out like our impact ecosystem questionnaire. What is it about your brand that you align with in these principles? How are you driving them forward in your business? Then how do you want to drive them forward together? Great. So we're definitely having an active conversation around what we're trying to do in terms of democratizing wellness and making sure that we're aligned and what those principles look like. And then making sure that we're mindful, of course, the products that we're bringing in are going to help you in the creation of a healthier, happier life at the end of the day is really the goal. But one thing I'm mindful of is in San Diego, I think it's very easy to debate between two incredibly clean products, which is cleaner. And I don't want to fall into that almost elitist wellness conversation that occurs of this is, healthier than this because this has this ingredient, when we still have, a large majority of people that are drinking Coca-Cola. Yes. So making sure that we have offerings that will service again where people are in their journey and start kind of swapping out things as we move towards healthier products is something I'm really mindful of, because I don't want it to be completely out of touch to someone who is just beginning their journey with nutrition. How do we make swaps along the way?
Thank you for saying that. I think it's really important, especially for someone like me. I said already, more is better, like more knowledge too is better. So I find myself constantly trying to up level my game, which is great if you have access and energy to do that. And at the same time, I'm reminded of the question. I promise you, I get this question twice a week. Like, oh, you told me to eat a snack and carrots were an option. but aren't carrots too sugary? And I'm like, come on, this is a spectrum of things. Maybe kale is less sugary than carrots, but these are like the 99th percentile right here. We do not need to split hairs to worry about whether carrots or cucumber or whatever have less sugar. And it's kind of what you're saying, like, don't parse through every single detail and try to be super dogmatic about the best. Just to appreciate that you're doing something healthy for yourself and try to stop stressing about it.
Totally. Cause I mean, stress is one of the biggest killers as well.
Yes. Oh,
And
absolutely.
I explained where I started, never working out, all sugar, like literally drinking Pepsis and eating ho-hos as snacks in my lunches. That was my childhood.
Wow.
And then in college, when I switched to this over exercising, restrictive eating, it was so conscious about, I can't eat this because it has this ingredient and this study said this.
Yeah.
And that study may have nothing to do with my body.
True.
Like, I could respond entirely differently to that
Yes.
ingredient, but I wasn't even listening or in touch with how my body felt. I was like, oh, this is what MyFitnessPal says is my calorie goal for the day. So I'm going to try to undercut it. And the stress of that on the body is infinitely worse than, like you said, having, non-fat Greek yogurt versus not, like,
yes,
it doesn't matter. So it's just getting to a point where it's a healthy relationship and a sustainable relationship. I think both sides of the spectrum could kind of optimize towards the middle a little bit.
Love it.
Degrowth.
Oh, absolutely love it. I know that people are super intrigued about Visor. I have just a couple more questions for you, but I'm hearing what they're saying probably, which is, how in the world are you funding all of this? So I know you don't want to give away your secrets, but can you give listeners an idea of how this actually works?
Yeah. So in terms of funding, we participated in a competition here in San Diego with the Alliance Healthcare Foundation. They were looking for social enterprises that were advancing health and wellness for populations in need. It was a very thesis specific competition. We were very lucky to be chosen as one of the winners. And that was kind of the original funding that we had to get the platform built and get it put out into the world.
Love
and
it.
then in terms of how it works, it's the brands that are making it possible.
There we go.
The brands are the ones that are doing the donations. They're the one offering rewards. They're the ones that provide content and kind of like create the whole in-app ecosystem.
Yeah.
And then we take it and we also do corporate challenges with companies that are looking for ways to incentivize their employees to stay active and give back. So we have corporate challenges with restaurant groups and schools and universities and governmental organizations and nonprofits. We call them Visor teams, but it's all of these organizations that are then using the app. And that's also a product that we offer.
Love it. So if someone listening is an individual and they want to get the app, how much is it going to cost them?
So it's free to the user. And that was a really big piece of, again, the accessibility, which is you're already working out. That's already challenging. Your sweat is your currency. So it's free for you to use. And it's on a smartphone intentionally because we're able to track your steps through your phone. So even if you didn't have an Apple Watch or didn't have a Fitbit, you were still going to be able to use it with just using your phone. So the consumer app is designed to be as accessible as possible.
Amazing. So I see very little reason, if you're someone listening who is exercising or wants to be exercising a bit more, why not get some motivation, get some prizes, and importantly, give back to the community? This is super, super powerful. So I want to close it with the toughest question maybe of the whole thing, which is, what are your top 3 or 2 or 4 or 1 favorite health tips?
Oh, that's a good one. Top 4, 3, 2, 1.
Any number.
My top health tips are, 1, that being really intentional about the choices that you make becomes easier when you ask yourself really thoughtful questions. I think so much of our life is in reaction and response and habit. So one thing I say is, if I go to the coffee shop, I'm not just going to order the same thing that I order every day. Now I go and I say, okay, how are my energy levels? How am I feeling? How did I sleep last night? What do I have in my day? What drink is going to make me feel good in 6 hours and tomorrow, and then let me order that. So some days it's a mocha and some days it's a tea latte. So it's kind of all over the place, but simple example of asking yourself thoughtful questions is how you are going to engage better with making healthy habit forming decisions. I think a second thing, kind of going off those thoughtful questions, is having like a safe space to talk to somebody about what's going on in your life.
Yeah.
And making sure that's something that you have kind of scheduled or you've discussed on a consistent basis, whether it's a therapist or a friend or even a coach or a group.
Yeah.
I think is so important, again, for knowing what questions to ask yourself.
Yes.
So what are we doing just because we feel like we should? Going back to the shoulds versus what do we want? And I think if we're doing those things consistently, like creating space for our own thoughts and engaging with them and feeling safe and supported in doing so, and then actioning on them, all of these other things, like moving your body and eating well and having good communication, fall into place.
Love it.
Versus if you're just like focused on, oh, I'm going to fix this one thing, it's a moving goalpost.
Yes.
The issues will move, but the problem never gets resolved.
Those are such great points. I love it. What a wonderful bit of wisdom to leave the audience with. So I'm confident they want to find out more and join Visor and download the app. Can you tell people how to learn more about you and how to find Visor?
Yeah, well, we would love to have you all in the community. If you want to connect with me, it's just Sam Pantazopoulos on all platforms. For Visor, it's Visor app on social. If you want to join, it's completely free to do so. Just go to the App Store, either iOS or Google Play. You're able to download, get set up, and start donating today.
Amazing. We will put all those links in the show notes. So be sure to scroll on down, get the app, check it out, check out Sam, where I'm sure you can learn more from her and see all that she's doing. Sam, I really appreciate you coming on Wellness Your Way today. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much. This was fun.
Of course.